Okay, so good afternoon to everyone, and we are back. But this time is a very different version in which it is a recorded lecture version compared to previously, where we used to have live streaming through Google Meet. But as for today, we have to opt for recorded video due to certain circumstances that I couldn't avoid. But hopefully, this one will be helpful for everyone to refresh back on chapter 5 as what we have done with the other chapters before we moving on to another chapter, which is chapter 6 on short report. All right, so today we are going to look again at chapter 5, and to let everyone knows, there's a bit of changes in the content here compared to the previous slides that we've been used for chapter 5. But later on we will see the a bit of the difference between this slide version and the previous slide version. Right, so today will be chapter 5 on mechanics of report writing. Alright, so what we're going to look here is again styles of writing, the grammar review, the differences between editing and proofreading, quoting and paraphrasing, and also the references or referencing style. So we are going to start off with styles of writing, and in styles of writing we're going to look at the active and the passive sentences. So according to what we have here as an example, between active and passive voice, the obvious difference that we can see is the length of the sentence. Okay, meanwhile in active it's a bit lengthy, and in passive it's shorter than in active sentences. Right, but in terms of the grammar also they are very different, in which in passive voice it's more to past tense, meanwhile in active it's more to present tense. Can be present continuous, it can be present perfect tense. Okay, but the obvious difference that active is lengthy, passive is shorter. Active mostly involve present tenses, and passive voice involves past tenses. Okay, because basically as we have known before this, tenses they are divided into two, which is past and present itself has a lot of sections of it. I believe this one everyone should have known about this. So just to make a bit refresher on the active sentence, the thing doing the action is the subject of the sentence. So if you look at the two examples that we have here, the thing receiving the action is the object. Okay, so if you're looking at the two sentences, the one that receiving the action is the object, in which in the first example, the students is the object, which is the one that receiving the action. Okay, so the one that is doing the action is the professor, meanwhile the verb is the teachers. Okay, same goes with the second sentence, John washes the dishes. So the one that who's doing the action, which is the subject, is John, and then the verb is washes, and then the dishes is the object, in which the one that receiving the action. So this is active. Meanwhile for passive, it's a bit of a reverse in terms of the sentence structure. Okay, because in passive sentences the thing receiving the action is the subject of the sentence, and the thing doing the action is optionally included near the end of the sentence. So it can be in the middle or it can be totally at the end. Okay, but basically normally it's usually at the end. Right, so you can use the passive form if you think that the thing receiving action is more important or should be emphasized. Okay, so you use this when you want to focus on the action, okay, the one that receives the action, especially when you're writing a report, because sometimes some of the incidents or some of the things that you reported in your progress report had been done, or been done by someone else, or been done by someone. So if you look at the sentence, it's almost the same as the one in active sentence. It's just that it is a reverse version, in which in active in active sentence, the one doing the action is the professor, which is at the beginning of the sentence. Meanwhile, in passive, the one that doing the action is at the end of the sentence, where that is the focus of the sentence. Means the sentence trying to tell everyone the professor is the one that teaching the student. Yeah, the same goes with the second sentence. The dishes are washed by John. So what is the focus here is John, who's the one who's doing the dishes. Okay, so this is one way for you to focus. So when you want to show to the one who read your progress report, you want to emphasize on who's doing that particular thing or that particular task, you can use passive. Okay, so that everyone will understand that John and the professor is the one doing the verb or the passive verb. Okay, so that's the obvious differences between active and passive. Passive basically when you want to emphasize, okay, emphasize the one that doing the action. Sorry, the one that receiving the action is not doing the action. So in passive, the one that receive the action is what we are emphasizing. Alright, so in terms of tenses, like I did mention earlier, present tense, they have their own sections, okay, like simple present tense, simple present continuous, and then past tense also the same thing. They have simple past tense and then past continuous tense. So we came out with an example here, and we divide them into two different situations, which is the active and passive voice. So if we look at simple present, the verb is in present form. Okay? It's just that it is added with s because that's what Tom normally do or regularly do. That's why it not comes. That's why it is in form of plural. Okay, Tom cleans the house. Meanwhile, in passive, it became past tense because we told the story or we told the thing done by Tom, let's say a few minutes ago or a few days ago. So the verb comes with is plus verb, and then the verb is being passed. Okay, but it is still considered a simple present. If not mistaken, this one is under past present tense. It's not past continuous, but it's something like past perfect tense. Sorry, it is past perfect tense. Means to say it's been done or perfectly done by the time that we are telling the story. Right, so moving on, the next one is the present continuous, in which it will involve is or are and plus ing on the verb. So if you look at active sentence, right now Sarah is writing the letter. So basically the verb is being added with is or are. Here we use is because the subject is only one, which is Sarah. And then of course because at that time the Sarah is still doing the verb, so the verb is added with ing, which is writing. So in passive, it became perfect tense. You know? So right now the letter is being written by Sarah. So it doesn't mean that immediately, okay, immediately done by Sarah, but still doing done by Sarah, means to say the process is still ongoing. And moving on to simple past, this is very easy. You can see the difference. Simple past for active means that past, simple past tense, and you just plus ed or t or any other forms to show that the verb is being done in the past. Meanwhile, in passive, you have to come out with was or were repeat by Sam, which is you also include the ed or t of that particular verb. Okay? The difference that you add was or were if it's more than one. Meanwhile, for past continuous tense, for active, okay, almost similar to present continuous. It's just that it happens in the past, so we cannot use is or are. So it would be was or were plus ing. Okay? As the example showed us, the salesman was helping the customer when the thief came into the store. So moving on to passive for past continuous, you have to add the word being, okay, being in between was or were plus ed of the verb. Okay, for example, we have here the customer was being helped by the salesman when the thief came into the store. So means to say it was perfectly done in the past. Meanwhile, in active, it just happened somewhere few minutes or few hours in the past. That's the difference. Same goes with present perfect, as we have seen on the slide. Okay, for active, it's only have visited, have plus present form of a verb, and then in the passive, has been plus what call that past tense of a verb. And same goes to present perfect continuous has been doing, means to say he had been done a bit from the past and just about to finish for active. And same goes to the passive. Okay? Nothing much, it's just that the verb doing in active become done in passive because it is just completed few seconds or few minutes ago. And same goes to past perfect, means to say perfectly done since the past. Oh no, not since the past, perfectly done in the past. Okay, the only difference is that had been and had. Okay, so in active, it is had repaired. Meanwhile, for passive, had been repaired. So both still in a past perfect form. It's just that one is active and one is passive. And same goes to past perfect continuous. Okay, instead of using preparing in passive, you change it into past perfect continuous form of verb, which is prepared instead of preparing. Same with the simple future using the word will. Okay, in active it's will finish, and in passive it is will plus be plus what I call that past form of verb. Okay, finish. And same goes to simple future, where you're going to use the be going to form. Okay, for active, Sally is going to make a beautiful dinner tonight. Meanwhile, in passive, a beautiful dinner is going to be made by Sally tonight. But if you look at the form, the focus of the active and passive was obvious. In active, Sally is the subject, and then the object is the dinner. And in passive, it was in reverse version, like we have seen in the earlier slide. And same goes to future continuous with will form. Okay, will be, and in passive is will be being watched by John. And also future continuous with the form of be going to. And also in future perfect tense, if you're going to use a will form, it's quite obvious here. Same goes to future perfect of be going to, and future perfect continuous using will, and future perfect continuous using be going to form. So mostly the difference is that one is a present and one is being past, or can say the verb is being converted into past form. And when you're going to use the word used to, so if it's active, used to pay, means to say every day Jerry pay the bills. In passive, the bills used to be paid by Jerry because the stress of the focus, I mean the focus of the subject is already different. One is stressing on Jerry. In passive, it focus on the bills. Okay, and also with the word the form would and always, sorry, would always. Okay? So in active it's would always make, meanwhile in passive it is would always be made, but they still bring the same meaning. Okay? And also future in the past with the verb with the form would. Okay, if in active it would finish. Meanwhile in passive you have to add be in between would form and also the past tense of the verb. And in future, in the past, where you're going to use the form was going to, um, the difference also quite obvious, because in passive you have to add to, you have to add be after was going to. Okay, and then will be continued with the verb and also the one who's doing the one who received the doing. Okay. So that is basically the difference of a sentence between active and passive in form of past and present tense. There were a lot more examples. This is only a basic to you to, who knows, maybe for you to recall back on how it works. And then in writing a report, one also have to be remembered is that the use of language. So writing a report, it cannot be complicated language, because sometimes some of the report had to be read by the public. For example, the one that the banks used to share with their clients, especially the public, those who have the, what we call that, the accounts, who open up their accounts with the bank. Not all of them are really used to, or really exposed to, or really experienced with the business world or financing world. So whatever it is, it has to be simple language. It cannot be complicated language, because it's not just those who are interested in business, in finance, in banking to read it. Even publics do also read the same thing also. And also make sure that there is no sophisticated and lengthy sentences. So the best is that try to paraphrase if you feel it's very long, or it's too what we call it, too sophisticated. And also, because this one will convey or portray the image of the firm, make sure you avoid jargons, because sometimes the use of jargons show an image of a company or a firm or an organization. So if you are writing a progress report on behalf of World Wildlife Fund, it has to be very formal. It has to be very standard, in which you're not to use jargon, so that not just those who love animals, not just those who are in veterinary, not just those who are doing biodiversity would read it. Even the normal public also can read it and understand what is being done by WWF and what will WWF do to conserve the animals and also the plants. And make sure you standardize your abbreviations. If you use AGM at the beginning, make sure AGM until the end of the report, because we have to consider consistency. Okay, it cannot be AGM and then suddenly annual general meeting, and then suddenly AGM again, and then suddenly annual general meeting. So if it's AGM, make sure that AGM started from the second time when you mention it. For the first time, you use the full meaning of the abbreviations. For example, we have here annual general meeting. So in the second time, when you're going to point it out at the annual general meeting, you just use the abbreviations. Because normally in the first time when they mention lengthy terms like what we have here, they will include in bracket the abbreviations, means to say signaling the readers that these are the abbreviations we're going to use for annual general meeting. Okay? And the next one is that you have to avoid subjective language. You cannot make them to, what call that, cannot make the reader to think heavily on what you're trying to say in the report. It has to be specific and precise. Okay, so make sure that there is no subjective language in which it can cause a lot of vague meaning of your sentence in your progress report. And to know that you are writing a good report, you must remember that a good report involves accurate, precise, and specific information. So because these can influence the result, like what we have in the example here. So if you look at those two examples, the one in green is very accurate. It's very precise because it includes the degree of the Celsius, and also very specific, telling that this particular person is having a fever because of this figure of degree Celsius. Okay, and very accurate because we did point it out at the patient. Also, a very good report involves fact-oriented information, because it will leads to inferences and prediction that will not provide any result. Means to say, the one that you're saying is according to fact. Okay, because um, people would like to know, how do you know that this person is reaching this amount of level of intelligence, or in when it comes to a project, how can you define that the bridge is strong? So you have to include a fact to support your report. If you look at the examples we have here, so we cannot simply accuse that person is drunk if not tested. Yeah? So that's why, if possible, what we mention in the progress report or any report, it has to be supported with facts, so that when readers read it, they will have a very strong trust on the progress of a particular project that you are writing, that everything works well, that everything solved properly. I mean, the problems were solved properly according to what you practice from theories or tested experiment and also observations. Okay, the next one, you have to make sure that your report has to be objective oriented. Means to say, it is not going to be influenced by emotion or opinion. Okay, and the best is that it has to be quoted from someone who is in authority, like we have here. Okay, we cannot simply write that currently the number of cases are rising up to 4,652 cases, because people would like to know from whom you know the figure. So in a way, you can include, according to the Director General of Malaysia Health Ministry, Dr. Noor Hisham, the number of the cases today will increase to a total of 4,652 cases. Then people will have trust on your report. This one is very important when it comes to reporting an incident, or if you are writing for a newspaper or a magazine, or who knows, like nowadays a lot of people are writing for online magazines and online news. So make sure that it has to be objective oriented, and it does not involve emotion or opinion, and involves someone in authority when you are writing a report. And then in writing a report, it is important for us to look at the effectiveness of the grammar. So grammar review is one process in which you proofread your writing and identify the grammatical mistakes in your writing, because wrong grammatical features you include in your report would lead to another meaning. Okay, people would think that that particular action is still being doing, or still being done, or it has been done, or is going to be done. So once you manage to identify the grammatical mistakes, you correct it one by one. So as nowadays, in the digital era, there were a lot of softwares or apps to help you to improve the grammar in your report. I mean, in a way for you to save time. So you can use apps like Grammarly, you can use Grammar Checker in the DocX or in Word document. You can even use other online apps to check your grammar in your report. Okay, it doesn't mean that it is a perfect grammar written included in a report. It can be a small slight mistake that could lead to a different meaning. So just spend a bit of time, let's say about 5 hours before you submit, or 5 hours before you finalize the report. You can upload it into any software that can help you out, because with these softwares, these apps, it helps you to reduce the time for you to check the grammar instead of reading it one by one. Maybe you can upload it to that particular apps or software. It will suggest you and give you examples, or show you that the grammar is incorrect, maybe in red color or maybe in bracket form. Okay, it depends on the features that the apps or the software offers us. Alright, so we have done this before. Okay, there were 10 grammatical mistakes in the text given below. The obvious one, if you look at this PowerPoint slide, because we turn on the corrections, that's why you can see the what we call the zigzag red line. So if you're writing a report and suddenly this type of red zigzag line came out, that means it is signaling you that there is a grammatical error. So you can, if you're using a mouse, you can right click, then they will suggest you the correct word or the correct terms to be used to replace the incorrect word or terms accidentally typed or written in your digital form of report. Alright, so this is the correct version or the correct answer of the phrase about Titanic. And then in writing a report, also very important for you to take note that you have to go through editing and proofreading process. So editing is the first task that should be undertaken after finishing the first draft of a piece of text. And any text is not just a report, even an essay, even in thesis writing or academic writing, in articles also. Who knows, maybe you are a person who loves to write something in a blog or in Facebook. Before you submit it or post it, you should have go through editing, where you look at the piece of writing one by one, line by line, and then you have to check whether it is in chronological order, or you can check whether you are missing any points or you are over include points that could drag your piece of writing. Okay, so it involves checking the content of the text to ensure that the ideas are expressed clearly and logically and form a coherent and meaningful whole. So this is one process where it helps you to make sure that you are in a correct direction. Your writing is in a correct direction. So the purpose of editing a report are for you to identify any spelling mistake in the report, like what we used to use, the term we use nowadays, typo, and then to identify awkward grammar in the report or grammar mistakes, and also to help us to make sure that we have answered the question or the report task, means to say we are in the correct direction. This one, I think you have experienced this in your assignment number 1, where during consultation we did go through the process of editing your draft and then the corrections ongoing, for us to make sure that everything is in the correct direction, and also with lesser grammatical errors and lesser spelling errors. Meanwhile, for proofreading, it involves checking over the text in finer details after editing stage, because also this will help us to detect errors in spelling, punctuation, grammar, and format. This one is for the smaller things like commas, semicolons, bracket, full stop, dashes. Okay, and it requires concentration to disconnect your mind from the content in order to focus on the language and the layout. So the focus for proofreading is the language and the layout. So in proofreading, we would spot and correct errors that involve spelling, typography, the grammar, the punctuation, and the use of the language, style, and format. Anything that miss at the editing stage. Means to say proofreading is the last filtering system that you have to undergo before you post or you share or you submit your piece of writing. So to make a proofreading process a success, first, never make assumption. You cannot assume the next sentence would be connected to the previous sentence. That's why in one of the tips is that you must make sure that you connect your mind from other things so that you can focus. And in proofreading, you can print out the text and then you proof it on paper. So while you are proofreading it on a paper, you can read slowly and deliberately use a ruler maybe. Some would use a pencil or pen to point at that particular line or that particular word you are reading to, so that your eyes focus on only one line at a time. Okay, this one is because some people prefer to use ruler, some does not. And then you go through the text several times, each time working on a different aspect. Maybe the first one you are looking at the grammar, second you're looking at the layout, third maybe you're looking at the other types of features that you need to make sure it is perfect. And on the first read, it is a good idea to focus only on reading rather than on correcting to get an idea of the overall content and the meaning. Means to say, first one, you skim through the text, whether it is in a correct direction or in a different direction you are expected the text to be. And on the subsequent read, on the second time you're reading, or the third or the fourth or the fifth, they will focus on correcting different types of errors each time. It depends. Okay, it depends. If your text focusing on language, then you could be looking into the grammar, maybe you're looking into the coherence of the sentence, maybe you're looking into the spelling. But each reading has its own function. First one will always be skimming. Second is where you scan for the grammatical errors, or you scan for the coherent errors, maybe you scan for other types of errors. So in proofreading, it can be 3 times you are reading it, but in between there is a distance. Okay, there is interval so that you might not fall into fatigue or mind fatigue, that you might not be able to focus while you are proofreading it. So try to view the whole text from a distance. This is another method, as some of the errors, especially those in style and format, are difficult to spot close up. Okay, for example, the layout, especially the line spacing, the paragraph structure. Okay. And then the next one in mechanics of report writing is quoting and paraphrasing. So quoting is something that a person says or writes that is repeated or used by someone else in another piece of writing or a speech. Means to say you depict from someone else, either it is being speech in the form of speech or in the form of a written type of information. So what we have example here is quoting. So when you are quoting, you have to use the what call that, the symbols to show that you are quoting, and usually it is the original word, that is the word being mentioned, or that is the word being typed directly from the original text or original person who give the speech. Quotation mark, yeah, that's the symbol, quotation marks. So if it's from a text, make sure word by word are the same. If it's a speech, make sure the structure and also the word are the same. Meanwhile, for paraphrasing is one way for you to express in your own words of the information or ideas that belongs to another person or found in sources such as books, e-books or journals or e-journals or website or blogs. And then reference citations are used when you want to paraphrase and summarize sentences, passages, and ideas in your own words to represent the author's idea. So in paraphrasing, you change the sentence, you change the word, but you still bring the meaning. So in paraphrasing, a very good skills that you need to have is to know what is the synonym and the antonyms of a particular word. And then from a long sentence, you can turn it into a shorter sentence, but the meaning is still the same. So when paraphrasing, it is a good idea to cite the reference source. For example, what we have here, okay, the difference between active and passive, but the meaning is still the same. And references also plays an important role in a report because in certain type of report, let's say you are doing a final year project in the form of thesis or project paper, references are very important because these references shows that you have been sourcing for information as references from books, journals, newspaper, magazines, or other form of information, either internet or printed type of information. So references has to be in alphabetical listing of authors whose researches or ideas were used to develop and validate your research or writing. Means to say it has to follow the alphabetical order. So what we have here is I depict from all Purdue version 6 and version 7, and also from BIP, I think it's BIP book if not mistaken, let me check. Couldn't see, it's quite small. Yeah, bip.com. So I sourced this from these two source of information because I did not change most of the things, and this is the difference between the previous slide. So normally when it comes to referencing, we need to know the basics of it, which is what we need to put in. So if the information came from a single author, the last name has to be the first one and then followed by author initials. Okay, like here what we have is Ahmed, comma, S, full stop, in bracket, the year, and full stop. After the second full stop, then will be the title, and then after the title of that particular book, then will be the company press, okay, the company that published the book. And then when it comes to two authors, make sure that you use symbols, not the full AND. Okay, if you look here, there's a symbol of N in between those two authors. The rest are still the same. It's just that this one includes the name of the volume of the journal and also the page. Volume is volume 113, edition number 1, and then edition 113, volume number 1, and then the name of the page is 117-143. That is the number of the page in the journal, and then it includes DOI. In certain cases, the DOI number, they don't include HTTP :/dx-DOI. In certain cases, it's only doi.org/10.1037. That's the simplest one because the key number of DOI is actually 10.1037. So DOI, DOI semicolon or full colon if not mistaken, then the number of it, right? This is only the basics. And if it involves 3 or more than 3 authors to up to 20 authors, there will be a lot of the first name and the abbreviations of the last names. Okay, the rest are still the same with 1 and 2. Meanwhile, if you're sourcing for information in books, you must make sure that the name of the author and then the abbreviations of the author last name and middle name. Make sure there's a full stop after the name. After the abbreviation, there's a full stop. Then in bracket is the year of publication and then the title of the work, and then the the subtitle has to be capital letter, okay. And then the publisher name, and you include the DOI if it's available. It depends, okay. If it's from a research or a journal, it has to include a DOI, because if your reader finds out that your source of information have DOI but you did not include DOI, you might lose a bit of credentials here. And for books with no author but edited, usually the name of the editor, okay, were written. Okay, so if you look at what we have here, Leach and Rushton are the editors. So means to say this text had been edited by these two person, and then followed by the year, and then the title, and also the publisher, and you can include DOI if there is a DOI included in the original text. For you to source for information from a printed journal, the same thing, the surname and then the middle name or the first name, and then the year, the title, and then the edition, and then the volume and number of pages. So in APA version 7 advises writer to include DOI if available. So if you have DOI, you put it at the end here after the full stop for the number of the page. I think some of you did experience this, how to include DOI, because in the assignment number 1 I did help some of the groups who have source for information with DOI numbers. I did help them to write how to write DOI numbers at the references list. I think you can refer back to your finalized assignment 1 copy for those who have DOI. And then for article in electronic journal, okay, when citing an article in an electronic journal, include DOI if one is associated with the article, means to say if available, okay. So what we have here is almost the same also, but you include DOI. DOI is a digital of index. That's the meaning of DOI, digital of index, because some articles or some journals, they are in digital form. So what they did is that they arrange everything with the number, which is what they call as DOI. So DOI is digital of index or indexes, if not mistaken. So DOIs may not always be available in some cases. So you use URL. For example, we have here in the second example, you can include the URL. Means to say in each article, in each journal, they have their own URL if they don't have the DOI number. Allow me to make a bit of corrections here. Oh, it's because I did not remove the hyperlink. So if I remove the hyperlink, the reference would look like this. And try to, yes. So this is how it looks like. Okay. And moving on, if you are sourcing for information from newspaper article in print, so newspaper article in print, you have to include the year, the month, and the day, and also the name of the newspaper, and then the page, okay. A4 here in example is not A4 size of the paper. It's actually some newspaper, they came out with sections. Some sections are called by A or B or C, or if it's international, they will write international 5. Okay, hopefully you are not confused with this word A4 here. Okay, it's not A4 the size of the paper, it's A4 the name of the page. Certain newspaper publisher, they have different initials for their paper pages. So if it's found online, because it is still a newspaper, you have to include the year, the month, and the date itself. And then the difference with printed is that you include the URL of the newspaper, or the homepage URL of the newspaper. Meanwhile, if you are sourcing for information from magazine, that is printed magazine, almost the similar structure. You have the name of the author, the last name of the author, and then the first name or the middle name, but for the year or the year of the publication, it's only the year and the month, because magazines are produced monthly, they are not produced daily. So if it's from a newspaper produced in January, so you just write down January, but before the word January itself, it has to be comma and then the year of the publishing, and then the title, and then the name of the magazine, and then the number of the edition and the number of the page or pages involved. And if it's a magazine in online, almost the same. It's just that you include the URL, the web page, the magazine website URL or homepage URL at the end of the references list. Meanwhile, if you're sourcing for information from web page or piece of online content, the same structure, so last name, first name, and then middle name, and then year, month, date, and then title of the page, and then the site name URL. Okay, we have the example here. But if the source of information was written by a group or organization, then you use the name of the group or organization as the author. Additionally, if the author and site name are the same, omit the site name from the citation. So what we have here, the example here, we have group name and then full stop, in bracket year, month, and date, and then close bracket, full stop, the title of the page, and then full stop, and you write down the site name, and then full stop, and then the URL. So example you can see here also, right? And these are the list of the sources that I source for information on references. I bet everyone have been sourcing for this also in Old Purdue and also bib.com. These are the only one that for me I use heavily while I was writing my project paper or my thesis and research paper in 2019. Nothing more than this. If it's more than this, I will refer to my supervisor, because normally supervisors they have their own hard copy of this type of references for you to list down your referencing. So I think that's the end of today's lecture on chapter 5 on mechanics of report writing, with a bit of amendment for the APA formatting style for references, which I refer to Old Purdue and bib.com, in which I believe for Old Purdue it's an updated version from version 6 and version 7. But if there is a bit of differences, I think it still be applicable in certain circumstances. Alright, so if you have any question, you can drop down your question in the comment box, because this lecture will be uploaded to our previous closed Facebook group. Also, I will try to upload this into Edmodo if possible, and also in our Google Classroom account. So you can refer to this online lecture recorded video in 3 different platforms, but I don't think it is applicable for me to share in WhatsApp, because WhatsApp has its unlimited number of capacity for me to upload in our WhatsApp group. So anyway, anyhow, if you have question, you can ask also in the WhatsApp group, and then the also can drop the question in the Facebook closed group comment box also. So I think that's all for today, and of course I will drop down the Google form for your attendance this week. And then I'm truly sorry that this week the online lecture has to be pre-recorded because of certain circumstances, especially on the stability of the network from my side as the host of this lecture, and I'm afraid also it could affect yours viewing quality through our online lecture, because I'm accessing through my own personal Streamix, not the university Streamix, due to the movement control order being imposed in Cebu. So whatever it is, you still have a lot of space for you to ask and to put into discussion. And as for your assignment number 2, since it is a fabricated version of a progress report or an imagination of a progress report, I don't think you would source a lot of sources for you to support your progress report. If do, it could be one or two only. It depends on what type of firm or organization you are representing, or what form of information you are, what we call that, you are reporting in your progress report. But if you are reporting on the structure of the bridge, let's say on the biological things, on animals, maybe you have to include a bit of references, because a good report also involve facts, and when you involve facts, you have to come up with a reference list. Very good example is the financial and banking industry. If they are referring the information from Bank Negara Malaysia, in the few last pages they will have a list of references where they source for the information for that particular market review, or a particular report on the investment of their clients in that particular financial organization. So don't mind to use a bit of fact, but not too much. And then make sure that you keep the information on the source of the information of that particular fact you are using, so that it's easy for us to come out with a list of references. But if do you have to use list of references or referencing to support your report, I don't think it is as heavy as the one we did in assignment number 1. So anyway, anyhow, if there's a question, you can ask me in our WhatsApp group, or you can reach me out personally, like some of you recently. I will try my best to reply and then try to help you out with your queries on your first draft on your report. But it is okay if you imagine you are working on certain field of industry. It can be construction, it can be fashion, it can be event management. But make sure if it's event management, not something like birthday party. It's a very small thing for a company to earn a profit. If do for event management, one of the most profitable business for event management is wedding planning. Okay, wedding planning industry is quite profitable nowadays, because some couples, they're willing to dump certain amount of money to make sure that their wedding day is a very memorable and also very wonderful day for them to celebrate. But as for birthday and surprises, I don't think it is feasible. It is feasible, but in business, I don't think it is one of the largest income. Usually the largest income in an event management is wedding, fashion, as what I have involved years ago, events on sports like drifting, gymkhana, football matches, badminton, and other types of sports. Usually these are the one that involves a lot of money, especially Olympics and Commonwealth Games, because big recipients, big participants, big number of participants, means to say involves an amount of money. So it has to be progressively done by the host or by the organizer of that particular sport tournament or sport event. And also, if you're dealing with nature, make sure that the focus of the nature has to be very specific. Let's say if you're looking into animals, conserving and preserving animals and plants. Make sure it is very objective. Okay, what you want to what do you want to preserve for this animal? Okay, maybe trying to make sure that they would not be in extinction, or try to make sure that they would be in safer zone. Okay, so anything you need to know, you just drop down in WhatsApp group, then, or you reach me out personally in my WhatsApp number, then I'll try my best to help you out to sort out your problem. So that's all for this week. Thank you very much, and soon the tutorial task will be uploaded either in Edmodo or in the Facebook page. So that's all for today. Thank you very much, everyone.